What really happens when the wife of a high-ranking ambassador crashes into the car of a 68-year-old Korean War veteran while drunk, then confidently walks into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom claiming diplomatic immunity? This woman is about to learn the hard way that some privileges simply do not exist. She will discover that certain immunity claims are meaningless, and that some husbands lose everything when their wives try to hide behind diplomatic protections. But what makes this case truly devastating isn't just the drunk driving. It's what happened when Judge Caprio made a single phone call to the State Department, a call that stripped away her immunity and destroyed her husband's diplomatic career. It's a typically busy Thursday afternoon inside the Providence Municipal Court. But the atmosphere shifts dramatically when Victoria Ashford, the 42-year-old wife of British Ambassador Sir James Ashford, stands before the bench facing serious charges: DUI causing property damage, leaving the scene of an accident, failure to render aid, and obstruction of justice. The incident occurred just 6 days ago at exactly 3:47 p.m., when Victoria's massive black Range Rover blew through a stop sign at 45 miles per hour and violently T-boned a parked Toyota Camry. That car belonged to 68-year-old James Park, a Korean War veteran who was inside a nearby medical supply store buying mobility equipment for his wife, who was recovering from hip surgery. The impact was so severe it deployed the airbags and shoved the Camry 15 feet before it slammed into a fire hydrant. Security footage clearly shows Victoria stumbling out of her Range Rover, visibly unsteady, inspecting the damage for 45 seconds before getting back into her vehicle and driving away without leaving a note, calling the police, or checking to see if anyone was hurt. Officers tracked her down within 30 minutes at the ambassador's residence, where she answered the door visibly intoxicated and refused Officer Martinez's field sobriety test, shouting, "I have diplomatic immunity. I'm the wife of the British ambassador. You have no authority over me. Leave immediately or I'll have you reported." Although embassy legal counsel intervened and attempted to block the investigation during a 3-day standoff, the State Department ultimately ruled that Victoria's actions were not protected by diplomatic immunity, leading to her arrest and release on $50,000 bail. Now Victoria enters Judge Caprio's courtroom wearing a purple Chanel suit, covered in gold jewelry, designer sunglasses still on, her posture screaming one message: "I don't belong here." When the bailiff calls the case, Judge Caprio reviews the charges and asks for her plea. Her attorney immediately stands. "Your Honor, my client is the wife of the British ambassador and is protected by diplomatic immunity. This court lacks jurisdiction." Judge Caprio raises his hand. "Mr. Whitmore, the State Department has already ruled that your client's conduct is not covered by diplomatic immunity." When the attorney continues to argue, Judge Caprio warns him plainly that unless a federal court order exists, the case will proceed. Victoria then stands and interrupts. "Your Honor, I understand perfectly. But you need to understand something. I am the wife of the British ambassador. I have diplomatic immunity. This entire proceeding is a waste of time and an embarrassment to international relations." The courtroom drops into stunned silence. Judge Caprio slowly removes his glasses. "Ms. Ashford, I've been on this bench for over 30 years. Please sit down." She snaps back, one phone call to the State Department and this whole matter disappears. Judge Caprio asks if she is threatening the court. When she claims she's merely stating facts, he orders her to sit immediately. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that button, because what Judge Frank Caprio does next will show you exactly what happens when someone tries to use diplomatic immunity to avoid accountability for hurting a Korean War veteran. "Where is Mr. Park?" Judge Caprio asks. The prosecutor gestures toward an elderly man wearing a veteran's cap. "Your Honor, Mr. Park is present." Judge Caprio nods. "Mr. Park, would you?" And James Park slowly rises with the help of a cane, a small man in modest clothing standing with quiet dignity as the judge thanks him for his service. Judge Caprio then turns toward the defendant and says, "Mrs. Ashford, do you see that gentleman? He is 68 years old. He is a Korean War veteran. 6 days ago, you crashed into his car and drove away without leaving your information, without checking to see if he was all right." He then motions to the clerk and says, "Let's play the security footage." The video begins, showing Victoria's Range Rover speeding through the intersection, completely blowing the stop sign, and slamming into the Camry with devastating force, spinning it into a fire hydrant before she exits the vehicle unsteadily, inspects the damage, looks around, and drives off. "Mrs. Ashford, that is you in this video, correct?" Judge Caprio asks, pointing to the screen. "Yes, Your Honor," but she begins, only for him to cut her off instantly. "There is no but here. You struck Mr. Park's vehicle and fled the scene. That is a crime." Her attorney immediately jumps in, arguing that his client was in shock. Judge Caprio isn't persuaded. He responds that the footage clearly shows her examining the damage for 45 seconds, which is more than enough time to leave a note or call for help. When asked why she didn't stay, Victoria lifts her chin defiantly and admits, "I panicked because I had wine at lunch, and I plan to report it later." Caprio leans forward, pointing out that driving away and later invoking diplomatic immunity when police arrived isn't panic, it's calculated behavior. Officer Martinez then testifies that Victoria was visibly intoxicated, slurring her words, smelling of alcohol, and refusing all tests while repeatedly stating, "I have diplomatic immunity. You have no authority. Leave or I'll report you." Judge Caprio plays the body camera audio, and the courtroom hears her hostile, slurred voice threatening the officer with a formal complaint 90 minutes after the crash. Caprio states firmly, "Mrs. Ashford, that recording proves you were not in shock. You were threatening a police officer." James Park then takes the stand. With quiet dignity, he explains that he served in the Korean War from 1950 to 1953 at the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir, earning a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. He worked as a mechanic for 40 years after returning home. His voice trembles as he explains that his wife, Susan, recently underwent hip surgery and relies on their car for physical therapy 3 times a week. But because of the crash 6 days ago, while he was buying her medical equipment, the car is totaled, and their $500 deductible equals nearly 3 months of groceries on their fixed income. When asked whether Mrs. Ashford ever contacted him to apologize, Park quietly answers no. Judge Caprio turns to Victoria and asks if she has anything to say to Mr. Park. Her attorney immediately interjects that he has advised his client not to make any statements. Caprio pushes back, asking whether she, as a human being, has words for the veteran whose car she destroyed. Victoria remains silent for a moment, then coldly says, "Your Honor, I sympathize, but this is a legal matter, and I'm following legal advice." The courtroom gasps at the lack of compassion. Judge Caprio stands and walks closer to the front. "Mrs. Ashford," he says, "I've seen thousands of defendants, and most show remorse. You are standing 10 feet from a man who served in one of our most brutal wars. You destroyed his car and left him with a $500 burden. And you can't even apologize because your lawyer told you not to. You've spent so much time in diplomatic circles that you've forgotten what accountability looks like. Titles don't make you better than anyone, and they are not shields against basic human decency when all Mr. Park wants is his car repaired." Then Victoria makes her catastrophic mistake. She pulls her phone from her purse and begins dialing. "I'm calling my husband," she announces. "This has gone far enough. He needs to contact the State Department and shut down this circus." The courtroom freezes. Despite Judge Caprio ordering her to put the phone away, she ignores him, loudly demanding that her husband intervene against this local judge. The bailiff steps in and seizes the phone as she protests about her husband's position, and Judge Caprio prepares to deliver his final ruling on her conduct. "Mrs. Ashford," he says sternly, "you have just committed contempt of court by attempting to interfere with the judicial process. You wanted to involve the State Department. I'm going to give you exactly what you asked for. Contact the United States Department of State, Office of Foreign Missions, and get the director on the line now." Victoria's face drains of all color as the impossible unfolds. Within moments, a sharp, professional voice comes through the speakerphone, identifying herself as Director Patricia Morrison from the Office of Foreign Missions at the State Department. Judge Caprio immediately takes control of the courtroom, confirming the call is on speaker in Providence Municipal Court. He explains that they are presiding over the case of Victoria Ashford, who has repeatedly claimed diplomatic immunity and has just attempted to contact her husband to interfere with the proceedings. He then asks the decisive question, does Mrs. Ashford actually possess diplomatic immunity for this conduct? The room seems frozen in time during a brief, agonizing pause. Then Director Morrison delivers the crushing answer. She states that she has personally reviewed the case and clarifies that the Vienna Convention does not protect family members from prosecution for serious crimes unrelated to diplomatic duties. She explains firmly that driving under the influence, fleeing the scene of an accident, and obstructing police officers are grave offenses with absolutely no connection to Ambassador Ashford's official functions. Therefore, Mrs. Ashford does not have diplomatic immunity. The courtroom surges with energy as the realization sinks in. Victoria looks as though she might collapse. But Director Morrison isn't finished. For the record, she issues a stern rebuke, stating that the State Department does not tolerate diplomatic status being misused as a cheap shield for criminal behavior and that such actions actively harm international relations. When Judge Caprio asks whether Victoria's attempt to call her husband was appropriate, Morrison shuts it down immediately, calling it highly inappropriate and warning that any attempt by the ambassador to influence the case would be taken extremely seriously and addressed directly with him. She then confirms clearly that Judge Caprio has full authority to sentence Victoria Ashford under Rhode Island law like any other resident. The call ends. A heavy silence fills the courtroom. Judge Caprio turns to the defendant and asks if she understands that her supposed shield is gone. Through smeared mascara and tears, Victoria finally breaks, stammering that she never meant for any of this to happen. Caprio gives her one final opportunity to address Mr. Park. She turns toward the veteran, her voice shaking, and delivers a genuine, though painfully overdue apology for her reckless decisions and for leaving him helpless at the scene. Though visibly hurt, James Park nods with quiet grace. But justice still must be done. Judge Caprio announces the sentence. He finds Victoria Ashford guilty on all counts, including DUI, leaving the scene, and contempt of court. He imposes a total of $13,500 in fines, orders full restitution of $15,800, and sentences her to 90 days in jail, effective immediately. When her attorney protests, Caprio silences him with blunt truth. She drove drunk. She destroyed a combat veteran's car. She fled. She threatened officers. She tried to manipulate the court. 90 days, he says, is merciful, and time she desperately needs to reflect on the difference between hollow privilege and real character. As officers place her in handcuffs, Victoria offers one final tearful apology to Mr. Park. He stands and accepts it with remarkable dignity, expressing hope that she learns from this moment. That act of grace shatters the last remnants of her arrogance. The aftermath is swift. The viral State Department call forces Ambassador Ashford to request reassignment just 2 days later to preserve diplomatic standing. Victoria serves her sentence, completes counseling, and later meets Mr. Park again to hand him his restitution check, admitting that before this case, she had no real character at all. 1 year later, writing from the United Kingdom where she now works with a veterans charity, Victoria acknowledges that Judge Caprio didn't simply punish her, he changed her life by teaching her that titles mean nothing compared to service and sacrifice. If this powerful story moved you, subscribe for more unforgettable courtroom moments where Judge Frank Caprio proves that no title places anyone above the law. Remember his words from this courtroom: everyone is equal. That is the true legacy of Judge Frank Caprio, the courage of director Patricia Morrison, and the quiet, unforgettable grace of James Park.